close when you're ready.
If you could come a little closer to the microphones, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Garrett, come on, man. Garrett needs a shave, but
Yeah.
you know, we're fortunate to be joined with Admiral Poole, so why don't we ask him to speak first, and of course you can direct questions to any of us. And Garrett, I'm sure you want to say something too. Admiral?
Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Vice Admiral Steve Poole, and I'm the commander of the Coast Guard's Atlantic area. First, I want to thank Senator Kennedy and Congressman Graves.
Cassidy, buddy.
Cassidy, I'm sorry. Jeez. Did I do it? Can you cut that?
He's the guy with good one-liners.
No. Let me start over. I'm Vice Admiral Steve Poole, and the commander of Coast Guard's Atlantic area. I first want to thank Senator Cassidy and Congressman Graves for allowing us to do this overflight today, to take them to see the highest impact areas from Hurricane Ida. I will tell you, what we saw was devastating. It was heartbreaking, and our thoughts are certainly with the people of Louisiana. We had a chance to fly through the path of Ida, where it hit. We were able to survey some of the waterways, and I will tell you, many communities were simply devastated. It was catastrophic, the impact that we saw from both wind and water damage. Many communities are still flooded, and it's going to take a long time to rebuild these communities, but I want you to know that the Coast Guard is going to be here as long as it takes to support the people of Louisiana. Thank you.
Sure. So today we took off from Baton Rouge Airport. Really appreciate Admiral coming in and the Coast Guard team that are continuing to be involved in so many missions, including search and rescue. But we took off and we went from here down to Laplace, went over through St. John, St. Charles, and then cut down through Lafourche, Terrebonne, down Houma, and went straight down Terrebonne to the coast, cut over into Fouchard, Grand Isle, and then from Grand Isle came back up basically through New Orleans, the North Shore, and then flew the I-12 corridor west back into Baton Rouge. What we saw today, number one, I want to reiterate what the Admiral just said. This is still a live disaster, a live emergency. We have water actually going up, not down, in some communities. We continue to have folks that are stranded. There are search and rescue missions going on, so this is a live disaster. Some areas have been able to pivot toward recovery and damage assessments. Other ones are still trying to find folks. As you know, we have cell networks that are down. We have internet that's down. We have water and power that's down in many of our communities. Some of the worst hit areas that we saw today were certainly in the Laplace area in regard to densely populated areas, still seeing water at pretty high levels. Going into the Houma area, saw a good bit of wind damage that was caused there, as well as some flooding that continues to exist. And as we went further down into southern Terrebonne Parish, you could see even greater devastation. Now, going down to Port Fouchard, we saw significant damages to the port facilities down there. I remind you, that is the energy port for the Gulf of Mexico. Grand Isle, I've seen that island for every hurricane since Hurricane Katrina. This is the worst that I've seen it. And keep in mind, it is stronger, more resilient construction. This is the worst that I've seen it on Grand Isle, and then areas all across the North Shore, including Tangipahoa, Livingston Parish. We did see flooding in those areas as well. So just want to urge folks, remind you, this is a live disaster, that we need to be working to be an asset in this, meaning to help our neighbors, to help our relatives, some of the seniors and those with medical issues, not become a liability by doing things that are irresponsible. And with that, I want to turn it over to Senator Cassidy.
Hey, thank you both, and Admiral, thank you. And it was good to be with Garrett. Garrett knows all the waterways from his experience with CPRA, and it was real good. Just to echo, but maybe to add, a different dimension. Just before we got on the plane, Cynthia Lee Shang, the parish president of Jefferson Parish, talked about how they're still trying to evacuate people from southern Jefferson Parish. And one of the folks that works with me, he went to his mom's house over in Tangi, and she said the water had risen and it was still rising, and it was up to his shins in their home, and they had gotten a call from the sheriff, and it was up to their waist in the restaurant in which they own. And so, both from what we're hearing from reports and what we see from the air, it is, as Garrett said, live. It is live. And even the areas that look good, we flew over Orleans, and the city looks good. No flooding, no wind damage to speak of, but it doesn't have any electricity. And we know that they're having problems with the lift stations and the sewer system, and that there is a concern that there might be sewer backing up. And as I mentioned, they tell me in JP they have problems with water supply. So South Louisiana has been hit, and it has been hit hard. And really, we need to think not just how we recover, but we also need to be thinking, how do we prevent the next disaster? So with that, I'm sure you'll have questions.
Are you going to take any kind of legislative action to try to get some funds here and the recovery effort, I guess, quickly, as fast as possible?
A couple things, and I'm sure Garrett will want to speak to this as well. The president has signed a major disaster declaration. That's good. FEMA will already be on the ground with disaster assistance. As we know, there's folks like the Red Cross and others that have set up evacuation centers. There will be supplemental payments that have to come down. We're still waiting for Southwest Louisiana, the Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Fund. And believe me, we'll push for it. It's been slow to get it for Southwest Louisiana. Hopefully it'll be faster for this. One more thing to say, though. The president did commit to 100% federal cost coverage for the immediate aftermath of cleaning things up. Garrett, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say that I really do appreciate the White House staying in constant contact with us throughout this disaster. Congressman Richmond, senior White House officials, Secretary of Homeland Security, and others, FEMA administrator, all of them have been in touch with us throughout this disaster. We appreciate that communication. In regard to kind of the recovery, let me be very clear. What's happened in Southwest Louisiana is unacceptable. To not be pivoting toward recovery and providing recovery dollars, it would be inexcusable to allow that to be exacerbated by leaving this one out as well. This was the most powerful storm to ever hit the United States, as I understand. And so we need to make sure that we have a rapid response, quickly pivoting toward the recovery efforts, which means if we can pay people to not work, as was done irresponsibly by our own federal government, we certainly can invest dollars in the recovery of one of the most important parts of this nation in regard to powering this nation's economy, in regard to being one of the most important intermodal hubs or port systems in the world.
Congressman, one last question. Can you describe to us more of the damage here in the capital region, Livingston and Ascension, and maybe Baton Rouge? Sure.
So we were out on the roads, and I know Senator Cassidy was as well early this morning. Trees down, seems to be mostly wind damage in this area. We were out there with chainsaws this morning trying to help clear roads. We did see where some trees had gone down on homes and saw some damages to homes as a result. We are aware of some flooding that occurred primarily over to the east of where we are right now, and that was mostly in Livingston and in Tangipahoa parishes. So I think
St. Tammany, lots of flooding.
And in St. Tammany as well. But most of it in the capital region, most of the damages that we saw and have been reported to us has been wind damages, primarily trees going down. Now again, you get down into southern Livingston and Ascension parishes, there is some flooding down in those communities, but primarily wind damages around here.
I know it could be hard to capture this now, but what is Hurricane Ida's impact going to be on the entire country based on what's happened here in Louisiana?
Well, we have to wait and see what that is, but as Garrett has pointed out, we kind of pump oil and gasoline across the nation. There's been a rate of inflation over the last few months that year over year is very high. Gasoline is one of those things. There's going to be a problem with gasoline supply because it is the Louisiana Gulf Coast that supplies the rest of the country. So I think you are going to see an impact in terms of higher fuel costs, and that just kind of goes through the whole economy.
75 cents a gallon, prices spiked nationwide after Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. $1.40 a gallon was the spike after Hurricanes Gustav and Ike in 2008. That was the largest price spike since the Arab oil embargo. They shut down 91% of offshore production as a result of this hurricane. As you know, we have some of the largest concentrations of the refining capacity in the nation right here. This is going to have an impact on national energy prices without a doubt.
And last night we got our first report of an unfortunate death due to this storm. Have you heard of any other deaths today?
I've not heard of any other deaths, and I just want to give a hats off to the docs, the nurses, the ward clerks, the techs, you name it. Last night I spoke to someone, and there was a generator that went out in one part of the hospital, and they had to have the nurses take the patient off the ventilator and use a bag and just kind of force air into their lungs as they moved them to another part of the hospital where they had a generator. So just thanks to all the healthcare folks who just worked overnight caring for those who were in the hospital already but potentially were going to be evacuated there.
And one of the things that seems to be complicating information right now is, as you know, we have major cellular networks that are down, internet's down in a lot of communities, and so I know that both of our offices have received a lot of phone calls about folks that are out of communication or missing right now. So I do think that this is going to continue to unfold, which is why, you know, we stated at the beginning that this is still a disaster, it's still an emergency, and there are a lot of key communities, including emergency operations centers in the southern part of the parish, that have been struggling with communications. Intermittent satellite phone communications, about all we've had in some of these areas. Actually, for example, in St. Charles Parish, that Bayou des Almonds, we're actually seeing, we flew over today, water levels actually going up right now, not down. So I do think this thing's going to continue to unfold. I don't think that we've heard about all the tough situations that are going on yet.
Based on what you've seen with the damage and everything, and I'm sure you saw the damage after Katrina, are you feeling similar to what you saw after that storm, or worse? What are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things to say about that. After Katrina, there was a lot of investment, and Garrett knows so much about this, can speak so well to it, in the levee protection systems, that if you're inside the levees, you are protected. And we saw that those levees are protected now. One thing that I've been stressing is that there's an infrastructure bill that just passed the Senate that's before the House that will invest billions in coastal protection projects, in coastal restoration projects. It'll invest billions in hardening the grid, which we've just seen New Orleans as a case example, and there's $50 billion that goes into helping to upgrade the nation's sewer and water systems. So as we wonder about fresh water and the ability to take off storm drainage and the sewage out of some of our southeastern parishes, this is money that, if this bill passes, will be available to address that. And did I say there also will be money for hardening the grid? Yes. And so, nice catch, honey.
Thank
you. There will also be money to extend broadband to all Americans. Now, all these things would obviously play a critical role in preparing for the next disaster. What we did after Katrina prepares us for this disaster. But we can't think only about Ida. We have to think about next year and years to come, and that's where this infrastructure bill, if it passes, will be able to help address those issues here to come.
So obviously we're seeing different impacts in different areas. I was wondering if you guys could talk a little more about, like, as a state, how do you manage all of these various needs, and like where are we focusing now? How do you balance the different jurisdictions?
You know, I'll just say it, and the Admiral may have something to say to this. I know that there's a command structure because sometimes you have to address one issue before you can address another. And so the federal partners and the state partners coordinate in that. After Laura went down to southwest Louisiana, and they pointed out before they could address the issues of the Intercoastal Canal, they had to first take out power lines that had fallen across. But before they could do the power lines, they had to do something different. Admiral, do you wish to speak to that more in particular?
Thanks, Senator Cassidy. Yeah, I think the federal, state, and local governments are well integrated. It's something called the National Incident Command System. It's created to be a plug-and-play system where we have different support functions that all work together, whether it's search and rescue, whether it's energy, whether it's health, whether it's safety. And so I think that's a well-exercised system. It's a system that all emergency managers know, and it's a fairly seamless organizational structure that we apply in any major disaster.
I'll just say this: I'd put our emergency managers at the parish, the state, and the federal level in Louisiana up against anybody in the world. I would, and unfortunately, it's because we've been the most practiced in the world. We've got a great group of folks who know what they're doing. You know, one of the things right now, you've got folks in the Coast Guard, for example, that are out there supporting search and rescue missions because there are communities that are isolated, that are cut off. You've got others that are working on damage assessments and beginning that pivot to recovery. But the great thing is as the Admiral mentioned, this is a system that's certainly the result of a lot of experience, and it's like a Swiss Army knife. You can do a lot of different things with that same tool and do a lot of things at the same time.
Can you describe just some more of
A little bit louder.
Yeah, can you describe some more of the damage? Like, what did it look like? And in particular, comparing it to Katrina?
Well, I didn't fly over Katrina. I was actually working in a hospital during Katrina, so my life has changed. Garrett can potentially speak to that. If you went over areas like Laplace, there could be homes flooded, or it just might be the streets and the water coming up to the doorstep of the home. Other areas, particular areas that were principally trailer parks, they were just like tinker toys being scattered about. Obviously, the less stable the housing, the more likely it was damaged. And then you would fly past a big the seaport area where Schwest has their boats. The roof just totally ripped off, and you could see down into it. And in some areas, as you get further south into the wetlands, it was unclear what was wetlands and what was land, because the water was so high that it was just, in fact, at some point, Garrett said to the pilots, he was in the jump seat at that time, see where the light poles are, that's next to the road. And they said, oh, really? Well, you couldn't see the road because there was the high water. Garrett, you want to add to that?
Yeah. One, look, I just have a rule. I don't like to compare disasters because they're personally devastating to the victims. I think if you're gonna macro level, let's keep in mind Katrina, you had flood walls that fell and the city filled up like a bowl. All right, so you had widely inundated areas. In this one, you know, you had areas with wind damage, you had areas that were underwater. You know, clearly the closer to the coast you got, you could see the impact of the surge in this disaster, as opposed to, you know, as we mentioned, when you started getting further off, I think as Senator mentioned, a lot more wind damage. But you know, at this point, I think just what's most important is that we focus on triaging the needs as the disaster response plan indicates, and that we focus on search and rescue and save as many lives as we can, and then begin pivoting to things like you know, water, food, and ice in those communities that need it. We've got to be working on getting power restored and water restored and things along those lines. But you know, I'll say it again, to that individual, this is personally devastating.
Thank you.
Anything else you would like to add, just to say to the people of Louisiana right now?
I think anybody that saw what we saw would be personally moved by it, because there are homes you look down and the home is destroyed, and you realize for that family their life has to start over. And I will commit, and I'm sure my federal partners will, that we'll do whatever possible to bring the resources necessary so that that family, that community can restart.
Just say that, look, we've been in touch with the White House, we've been in touch with the governor, Senator Kennedy, Senator Cassidy, Congressman Scalise, Congressman Carter, Congressman Letlow, Congressman Higgins, Congressman Johnson. Look, we are committed to making sure that that we get through this. I know this is an awful experience. It is. It is an awful experience. But I'll tell you, we are going to be pushing to get all the resources in place. We are resilient people. We can and will make it through this. And I want to ask fellow community members, look, if you made it through this okay and you're doing well, don't sit around and wait for government to come in and help. You're a member of our community. Step in, help clear roads like we did this morning. Get in there and help. If you can help provide food and other things, we have some great volunteer organizations, some of the churches and others in our community. You know, be an asset, don't be a liability in this case. This is how we've gotten through disasters in the past, and it's how we're going to get through this one, because we are, and we're going to be stronger for it.
And we will build back stronger.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Admiral, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, sir, thank you. Appreciate it.
Everything needed.